Hey, Haley.
Hi, Mike. How
How
are
are
you?
you? Good.
Pretty good.
I'm probably going to go on mute and hide my face because I'm going to be delivering some PPE items somewhere while I'm doing this.
Okay, no
Okay.
problem. Good for you.
Thanks. Yeah, I had a guy in my district. He has a 3D printer. He made me 750 face shields for one of my long-term care facilities.
Wow, that's incredible. Oh my
Impressive.
gosh.
Yeah,
3D printers.
and he was like, he's one of these guys who was like, please don't tell them where it came from. I don't want any type of exposure for this. Just let me know when you need more. And don't ever
That's
say my
great.
name. I was like, okay.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
That's very awesome. Haley, how many folks are we waiting for? Should we go ahead and get started?
Let's see. I know Namdi accepted.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure if anyone else responded.
Jerome may be joining in a few minutes.
Okay.
Back to back calls this morning. So
yeah, I think we're just waiting on Namdi. So.
Oh, there he is.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Good.
Perfection. Hold on. I actually have the agenda right in front of me because I'm trying to use two computers right now. So hang on.
Sure. I can share it on my screen too. Whatever.
Oh, that'd be good.
It's easier. Okay.
Okay. Yes.
I like that agenda, Haley.
There we have it, and our first. Okay, so it's good to see everyone again. Namdi, I like your backdrop.
Thank you. Nice.
That is nice.
Delaware Pride, loving it. See that. So basically, we wanted to get these planning meetings going again. To make sure that we can check in on a regular basis about how we're administratively moving everything forward. Thanks, Fran. You too. I did have a nice weekend. Everybody else did. And just kind of get ourselves back in order in terms of how we are planning our meetings for the overall consortium, but I think also the work groups, since I feel like, our consortium meeting that we had, how many weeks ago was that? I have no sense of time anymore. 2 weeks ago. We really were, in terms of actions that were taken, we're focused on, what's the capacity of our current work groups? What should our current work groups be doing, if anything? And of course, obviously we're kind of moving into a somewhat of a loosening of restrictions on things, but it seems like for the foreseeable future, we'll still have somewhat of a restricted ability to meet and that kind of thing. But we affirmed the intention for the educators work group to continue to do its work, for the redistricting work group, essentially to pivot and become the funding work group, or to pivot to focus on the funding priority that we had discussed from our earliest meetings as a consortium. So I think the best use of our time as a planning group would be to talk about some of those pivots that were made clear and to figure out how we want to coordinate those meetings. I think would be probably the shorter term goal. And if we maybe want to talk about when we think is realistic in terms of the next consortium reconvening. I know we've had some side conversations about that, but nothing has been set in stone yet, as we're still kind of feeling our way through all this pandemic stuff. So I guess we could start from there. If anyone has any particular thoughts and feelings, I know we have half of our co-chair teams, although multitasking. Oh no, I think I see Eugene is here also, and then I see a phone number. I don't know who that is, so I don't know if Noelle is here. But so maybe it would be good for us to get a feeling for how we think that the work groups should be doing in terms of a schedule moving forward. Because I personally am eager to see us actually, advancing what we said that we wanted those groups to be able to do. And now I think we just have to figure out how do we coordinate and support that. And if the staff has any thoughts on how we support that in terms of capacity. I think those are all the things that could potentially be on the table, at least for agenda item number 1. So I do not know. There's someone here on 302-367. I don't know if who that would be. I don't know if that person can unmute and let us know who you are so that we don't overlook you, but hi.
Hi, Pam Bargren. Is this a public meeting or no?
It is. No, it is a public meeting.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay. Hi,
What was your name again?
Pam,
Oh, okay.
and then Bargren.
Great. Thanks. Nice to have you.
Thank you.
Okay. So
Hey, Tizzy, can I ask a really quick question?
please do.
For future agendas, should I add public comment?
That's probably a good idea.
Okay.
And Pam, this is our first time doing this as a public meeting, so bear with us on some of those fronts. I think that's probably a great idea. Thank you, Haley.
Sure.
So we'll make that note. So do we want to start with just general thoughts on when we should plan for our next full consortium to meet? We don't have a date yet, and I think that might inhibit us a little bit from even knowing how the work group should be structuring their work plans as well. We've prior to everything happening, we were on a sort of an every other month orientation that was meant to accommodate the coordination challenges of also being in session, and obviously that's changed. We pushed back our April meeting to be a May meeting, and it was early May, so I think initially we had another meeting scheduled. Did we have another meeting scheduled for June, Haley, or had we not scheduled that at that point? We didn't have anything scheduled beyond April? Okay. So I guess we were kind of waiting to see what happened in April. So presumably that would have occurred later in the summer. But so I think at this point, it doesn't necessarily, I don't know that we need to have another full consortium meeting in June, but if we think that that's necessary, I'm willing to hear that from everyone. Potentially we could just go ahead and shoot for something like August when we'll have a clearer sense, I think, of what school reopening is going to look like, what some of the challenges that we're facing in response to school reopening, and so that then our agenda, I think, as a consortium might be a bit clearer at that point, and to give a little bit more time to our work groups to get underway and addressing their various, related agendas to that. So does anyone have any thoughts about the idea of just scheduling a consortium meeting at some point in August? Cases for or against?
I guess it depends upon when everybody's going back to school, what that looks like of some of it. Also, just seeing what the commitment is to keep the consortium moving along as well after the end of this budget cycle.
Correct.
I would say we would need to talk to the superintendents and also the CFOs from our end, because I think one of the things that was brought up was time constraints on both the superintendents and the CFOs, and so maybe August is better than doing it in September. I'm just saying, as we just think about that, just making sure we're taking that into consideration, because I do remember that distinctly from our previous meeting.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? I mean, I think my inclination it would be, prior obviously to putting it on a public calendar or anything, maybe we pick a date to reserve and then can use that as a discussion point, when those of us who are chairs are reaching out to consortium members, particularly those that are, operating school districts, about what they would think about meeting maybe in an early August before things get, when they're getting busy, they're back to work, presumably, but maybe in between sort of the resolution of the current school year and the resumption of the next school year, whatever that's going to look like. Right. So do we want to look at maybe just sort of picking a date that's, I guess it would be what, 3 months out, June, July, August from our last meeting? Haley, does that make sense? Maybe we could come up with a Thursday evening in that first week
Sure.
and float
Did
that.
everyone think like 5 to 7 worked well, that time frame? A lot of people were able to join.
So you guys know I will be on vacation as long as vacations are still allowed to happen.
Sure.
August. So
In the
I think
first
that's
week of
something else.
August?
I think that's something else to think about is that a lot of people in the beginning of August are taking. Not that that makes anything. I mean, I could be the only person, but I'm.
Lucky you.
Schools are going back.
Right. I would think if schools are going back, our supers will probably be working. Well, then that's what we can ask them. So if we just sort of somewhat arbitrarily say, let's look at the first week of August. How's that look? If feedback I think that we get from a lot of folks is I'm on vacation, then we can revisit it.
Fine.
But just as a starting point for that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of an agenda, obviously our last meeting was really just focused on, creating space for our work groups to do work, which we hasn't moved forward yet. And we know that we're not going to be in a position, I guess, to resume the agenda that we left behind for April, which was to sort of receive a redistricting update. That timeline is still being recalibrated. So I think whatever happens in August, from my perspective, would be an opportunity for us to hear from our work groups in terms of what our work groups were delivering on. So I think whatever the agenda is going to be dependent on the type of schedule that our work groups set and the type of deliverables that our work groups commit to bringing back at an August meeting. So I think that that's something that I'd like to have further conversations with our chairs about. And I don't know, Eugene, Namdi, Mike, or I don't think Noel's on the phone. If that's something you guys would like to give some thought to, or have you given any thought to that? Namdi and Eugene in particular, how about the shift of redistricting to the funding orientation? Why don't we talk a little bit about what that could look like? And
Yeah, I had a couple just thoughts and ideas about ways, I guess, to begin that turning that ship in that direction, looking at our superintendents as well as the CFOs from the districts. I don't know if it would be maybe an email or I mean, I think a little might be a call, but I'm thinking we're trying to get information from them. I'm assuming each individual district is going to have different priorities as far as what they think the funding, our work on the funding will be. So try to gauge that from them, then being able to utilize that as a way to bring them further into this work.
Okay. So maybe with each work group, I guess that work group in particular needs to look at membership, right? And you mentioned in our larger meeting, sort of keeping the same work group membership potentially and adding CFOs.
Correct.
So I think that's something that needs to be confirmed. I mean, revisiting the membership needs to be confirmed. I think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, to reach out to some of those in terms of getting a feel for them on what they think the work groups sort of strategy should be moving forward. What's the end goal? I feel like that we're still a little bit fuzzy on determining that. So that I think that would be a great next step for that particular work group. It's like how can we make sure that we have the membership solidified and the set of goals for that group solidified, let's say, assuming we are working towards an August meeting at which something's going to be reported out from that group in terms of its initial steps and what it's planning to do.
Yeah. Do you know if there was, I guess when we were thinking of knowing we will eventually get to the point of having this funding work group, if there was ever like a draft overview of the charge for it?
Oh, from our initial.
Yeah.
That's a great question. Haley, do you have handy, I guess I would say, our initial priorities when we sort of broke it into the 4, and with the assumption that we would have work groups to go with each of those. Sort of how we described the agenda of the funding work group.
Yeah, I think I have it right in the annual report. Let me just go pull that up, and I can copy and paste it maybe into the chat.
Okay.
It's not too specific. I don't think it has too much like information about what parameters around funding.
Yeah.
And we can remember the wording that the consortium wanted to focus on. So
I think that would be helpful to get us refocused. But yeah, so beyond that, Namdi, in terms of looking at looking at the membership, looking at the goals that you would like for this reoriented group to have on the basis of what we're about to look at, I think is another great goal for you guys as chairs to work on with me. And then I think, not least of which, I think we need to set a few dates for the work group to convene, probably sooner rather than later.
I think it'd be very helpful to anticipate some of the deliverables that you would expect that you'll need going forward. I think even if you think of the time frame being the rest of 2020, what do we want to have accomplished in that time frame? I understand you'd want to wait to have a conversation with the working group members, a timetable, but let me give an example, because I'm not thinking of anything all that exotic. So at various times, and Namdi, I think you brought this up right at the consortium meeting, we talked about the Newcastle County Tax District. So one possibility is, should we be preparing a policy, a research brief on what is it, how does it work, where did it come from, how does it operate, what is its status, what are the options, just so everybody in the working group and eventually the consortium would be on the same page. Because what you see here, I just want to say a lot of people are oblivious to it, and those who know about it, and I mean their chiefs all know about it, are all seeing it like from different vantage points, which is all legitimate, right? So I'm just giving that as an example because it's an easy one, right? Right? And if we could begin to think of what the working groups, the consortium would like to have accomplished in deliverables, sort of over the next 6-8 months, that'll certainly help the team.
Yeah. And I think for the purposes of this planning group, we should have a sense of those within the next couple of weeks would be great. I don't think that we need to belabor that in terms of the timeline to figure out, all right, what does the work of the work groups look like for the rest of the year? Knowing that we'll have check-in points sounds like likely in August, and then I'm sure we'll have another broad consortium meeting, at least once, if not twice more, between now and the end of the calendar year. So Haley posted into the group chat how our priorities broke down. So the funding priority is specifically oriented to the funding formula, so overall allocation of funds throughout the school system. And I know in the context of the consortium meeting, we talked a little bit more about what does it cost to support redistricting as an enterprise. And I think those are related but slightly different twists on the same idea. So I think we need to kind of really solidify what aspect of funding we're looking at. Are we looking at funding generally? And so I think those would be the conversations you could have with some of those members. And I think and that would help us understand what research, what sort of briefs are necessary for early meetings of this reoriented work group to understand what they need. I know earlier on we talked about having some basic education on the funding formula, having some basic education on the tax pool. So I think the sooner that we know, you know, where the work group wants to get in terms of deliverables, then we'll be able to help give the team some guidance on what we'll need to support that thinking. Is that helpful?
Yep.
Okay.
And
So
we had the other thing we had mentioned about trying to assist in the development of the referendum change legislation. That was something that we had mentioned as a possible charge. I don't know where that is, but maybe I really do believe that can be an anchor as well to really get the districts on board to support the work. If they see us doing something that they know is definitely toward their benefit as they see it.
yeah, I think that you should, I mean, if you and Eugene can kind of take from this and take from what was just the consortium meeting and make a short list of policy priorities within the category, I think that would be a good basis for a conversation with membership about, you know, just sort of how to stack the deliverables group, that then we can bring back to the UD team to help us figure out, you know, what information is needed to actually do something on all of those.
That sounds like a plan. We can connect and meet with Haley to talk it through.
Okay.
And Nandi, when you say referendum, do you mean Christina School District?
No, it was about the overall referendum change so that the districts wouldn't have to go to referendum. It's legislation pending, so we were just going to try to aid it and try to make sure that it encompasses, I guess, what our district partners also want inside of the legislation.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, that was Jake's had put something in about that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it had been, there was a lot of participation from the superintendents on that. So I think not a, hello, little mini Eugene. I thought, yeah, I think that's something that the membership is probably likely to want to discuss just as part of, you know, about funding from revenue to allocation. It makes sense for it to be part of the discussion. Handful of priority points. So that's helpful. So if you can come up with sort of an idea of what you think, where you think that that group is going to go. But I think it would also be helpful to know, and I don't know if you want to, this probably should be informed by some conversations with the district members in particular, what a reasonable just schedule structure looks like for your work group.
Right.
You know, is this going to be a monthly meeting, in which case we only have a couple months before August, which is kind of crazy. Is it going to need to be more frequent than that? That's going to depend on the deliverables at whatever intervals we decide to set them. So I know it feels like we haven't had these conversations in so long. It's like now now we're here and it's like, oh no, now we don't have, feels like we don't have as much time. Okay. So I hope that.
Comment, if I might, just on the timeline because of what Namdi was suggesting. So my understanding is that Judge Laster is, at the time of his ruling, established a 45-day period before hearing arguments, which is raising the question of whether the state, the counties, relevant counties, and the other litigants would mediate. And I don't know how we determine that, but it seems to me if we knew what the inclinations were, that might be helpful in the timeline of the process.
Okay.
So I would think it's a matter of whether the one of you on behalf of the consortium would like to do an inquiry.
I'm happy. Yeah, I've had some ongoing conversations, you know, with some of the folks from the ACLU in particular who are on that.
So there's that side, and then the other side would be to go to people like Matt Meyer, right, and others about their intention.
Where they are on it.
I think that would help us if we had a sense of the trajectory, whatever they tell us.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how much they'll be willing to say at this point, but they're going to have to respond or not within that time frame.
Okay. So presuming,
and if you don't mind, my concern is the judge had made it clear that if not, he would impose a solution.
Yes.
Likely could be an annual tax assessment, which is very challenging practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, my understanding is there wasn't really any hold up in terms of their coming to the negotiating table, all the
Right.
together, but I don't know that 100% for sure. But that's certainly something I think that would be interesting to inform the work group's work. Some information we could gather for.
I would think if there's a holdup, it would be on the county side. Question is whether they're willing to go, because I think the litigants have always said they were ready to sit, but I may be wrong.
So Namdi and Eugene, can you kind of keep that on your list of inquiries that we'll want to be able to bring to the work group?
All right.
And I'm assuming, and this maybe is a big assumption, that we are going to be meeting as a planning group on a weekly basis. Is that a safe assumption? I don't know if it'll be at this time or if we'll adjust the time, maybe go back to our Fridays or Mondays or anything like that. That's a little bit to be determined, but assuming we'll be meeting weekly, can we sort of have set next week as a time, I guess, Namdi and Eugene, to revisit and say, okay, do we know now, what are we projecting for this particular work group in terms of meetings, priorities, and information needed to pursue those priorities? Would next week be an okay time for us to see a rough list of that?
I think that's something that we can do.
Okay.
At least we'll try.
All right. I believe in you. You can do it.
Indeed.
All right. So then next week we'll be able to review that and hopefully put a pin in it and off to the races again.
Tizzy, can I ask, while we're all on, should we try to figure out like a consistent day and time moving forward?
That's a great idea.
And just letting everyone know, I would need to get the meeting posted a week prior, because now they're public. So we have to meet at least by next, I guess if I got it posted today, next Tuesday.
Right. I mean, I personally could go back to a 10:30 Friday like we used to do. I could clear that time out again for an hour. And I know that would give us the ample space to publicly notice if we wanted to do that. But I don't know if anyone else has conflicts at that time now or a desire not to do a Friday morning.
It was normally Friday morning, or was it Friday? It was Friday. Was
Morning.
it 10 o'clock?
10:30, I think we ended up on. We used to meet in person at 10:30.
30.
And then we
I'm
started doing
fine.
Zooms.
I'm fine with Friday 10:30 still.
Yeah, it works for me as well.
Anyone else? Any objections in the room? Okay, hearing none. I think we can.
So moved.
So moved. I think we're good for that. So we'll have a regular schedule that we can be posting. And any thoughts on how we might want to adjust what we're seeing as the current agenda? Obviously, we talked about having a public comment added, research updates, maybe work group updates is probably appropriate at this time. Any other thoughts on what would be needed on a standing agenda? No? Okay. Mike, I think you are on the run right now. I don't know if you want to speak to, is he still there?
It doesn't look like he's there, Tizzy.
Oh, he's gone. Okay.
I can say that that the educator group reconfirm membership. Make sure everybody wants to stay on and be on, that is on, and possibly expand a little bit to
Yes.
a few more, a little more diversity in some cases. So we've been going back and forth trying to figure that out. I think Mike's going to reach out to everybody in the near future and try to figure out when we're going to start meeting again and figure out what the priorities are moving forward.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, I think the next steps for both of those two working groups are probably pretty similar. I mean, I think it would be great to have next week a sense of, all right, we've revisited the membership list. either we have what we need or here's the gaps that we need to expand on. You know, the new draft priority deliverables kind of things, and then the projected meeting schedule till the end of the calendar year, which I think was a great point by Dr. Rich. Get that from both work groups as updates next week in some form. I think that would be great. What do you, would that be possible for educators too, do you think?
We can let you know where we are in the process.
Great, perfect.
As much as we can do, we will do to get it done. I mean,
Yeah.
some people respond very quickly in that group and some not at all.
Well, that's, yeah.
That's how it is.
That's how it always is. So then I think in terms of looking at our future Redding Consortium, full consortium agenda, I think it'll end up being informed by what we're getting from those particular work groups. And Matt, did you have a point that you wanted to make?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right, perfect. So I feel like we're kind of okay on number one. Anyone feel like there's anything that we're missing in terms of projecting out next work group and full consortium meetings? If not, I'd be happy to hear about research underway. Who's leading that? Anybody? If anyone's talking, they're on mute.
So would you like a general overview of all the things that we've been working on, or how would you like this conversation?
Sure, Sarah. Yeah, let's start from there. Just sort of where we are. And then if you would like to, you know, if there's any questions or thoughts or needs you think that we need to be thinking about, lay it on us.
Okay, so there's a number of things that the research team has been working on to support both of the work groups and also to work on different aspects of the mandate of the consortium. So in terms of supporting the work of the educator work group, we're working on several things. One is a revision of the final recommendations document that's gone through a few revisions in terms of writing up the local data that helps to inform and support the recommendations, as well as looking at national research on what are the kinds of practices and recommendations that have been made that are effective in other places, and making sure that that's part of the recommendation document, as well as fleshing out the recommendations in terms of getting more specific about how they map onto current policies and practices in the state of Delaware. Another thing that we've been doing to support the work of the working group is a more detailed analysis of educator mobility or turnover and retention rates and how that differs across high needs and non-high needs schools throughout the state, as well as at the district level, and how that looks for leaders versus teachers, different levels of experience, etc. So that's a pretty detailed analysis that's ongoing. We imagine that that would be turned into some sort of a brief for public release. In terms of supporting the work of the Redding redistricting work group, we've done several things. One of the things that was produced a little while ago was a making the case document that helped to lay out some of the key pieces of sort of what are the problem statements that we're trying to address in terms of why is redistricting an issue in northern Newcastle County. What are some of the primary issues that folks discuss in relation to redistricting that need to be part of the conversation. We also looked at coming up with a matrix or a different kind of a framework for thinking about all the must-haves and may-haves that are included in the mandate for what needs to be incorporated in a redistricting plan. We've worked in a couple of different ways at coming up with a framework or a matrix for understanding or guiding and facilitating the discussion about redistricting and how to go about having such a complex conversation in a staged sort of fashion for decision-making purposes. We've also done some research on different educational reform models, everything from school takeover models to different sort of transformational models that work in high needs or high poverty schools across the country. We imagine that could probably turn into some sort of a brief. We've started working on a couple of one-pagers that are meant to be educational pieces about sort of when we talk about education redistricting, what do we mean? What's governance in education? Because we felt that when we have these conversations, a lot of folks in the public might not necessarily understand why it is that we're talking about redistricting, and so understanding what educational governance is sort of a educational component. In terms of the mandate to assess and monitor the educational needs of Wilmington students, there's a couple of things we've been working on. One is doing a deep dive on the last 20-year trends in achievement in Delaware compared to other states, looking specifically at disparities or differences across social groups like low income versus not low income, by racial subgroup, by ELL status and not, and disability status and not. So we're working on co-producing a brief with 20-year trend data, looking at those disparities for the state of Delaware and how they compare to other states, whether the gaps are bigger or smaller, et cetera. We're also continuing to work on the next version of the Wilmington Students Achievement Report that's been an annual publication of the previous of WIAC and WIAC. And so we'll be working on that as well. We've also done some work on what we call a landscape analysis, where we reached out to other stakeholders to find out how they're engaging with young people around identifying and assessing the educational needs of young people. We did that in the same spirit of sort of helping to monitor and assess educational needs. We felt that part of the Redding Consortium's model, being data and research informed and also stakeholder engaged, was something that was important to follow. And so we wanted to look at how stakeholders had been engaging with young people. We have a brief that's in process that summarizes who we talked to, what we found out, what folks are doing, and identify some of the gaps or the places that the Redding Consortium could play a role if they wanted to engage with young people around identifying educational needs. In terms of COVID-related things, we've had a couple of people collecting, collating, sort of, and organizing different COVID-related resources for different stakeholders, parents, district leaders, state, et cetera, on the different kinds of things that people are proposing would be good to be thinking about as schools and districts come up with their return to learn plans. Yeah, I think that's
that's a lot.
Missing one or two things, but those are the kinds of things we've been doing.
Excellent. I mean, that's tons of work. So my first question is whether we think, do you think our work groups members in particular, which I guess is the consortium as a whole, has a solid grasp on the work that's being done? I guess my thinking being I want to make sure that all of the research that's being done is being fully utilized, and or that the work groups to, capitalize on our capacity to do that if they have, want to take it in this direction or that direction. So I guess I would be asking, Kelly and Haley as sort of our staff liaisons to the work groups, if you think we need, do we need to kind of brief the work groups again as we're kind of coming back on what is available to them?
So I think that could be helpful, Tizzy. I also think we have the annual report that we just wrote that will include a lot of the types of research that we can also share with the work groups, but also with the consortium so they know what's going on. But I don't think as we reconvene, that's something we should make them aware of so that they have done a lot and there is a lot out there. It also shows that the consortium itself hasn't been idle either.
Right, exactly.
which I think is a big thing we need to make sure they know.
Yes.
Tizzy, I
Yeah.
think the other piece of this is there is so much going on, and you're absolutely right. We have to find out, make sure the working groups understand the resources that are available to them.
Mhm.
But the other side of that, it's all consistent, but the other side is defining again these priorities and deliverables, right? Because we're doing so many things, which ones really ought to be put a little bit at the top of the list
Mhm.
on our timetable.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think I would be surprised if the average consortium or work group member knew all of this great work that was being done on their behalf. So I think that'll be an important place that we need to start and make sure that they and the public are aware of what it is that we're working on. But I think it's great. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts about that? And just sort of make sure, of course, that it all ends up ultimately syncing up with the priorities and, prioritize deliverables that the work groups decide that they want to be engaged with.
Tizzy, this is Fran.
Yes, Fran.
That's great stuff. I'm just wondering, does this work group feel that it has a grasp of the work that Sarah and her group has been doing, and might it be worth spending a meeting with having Sarah share it with us as well? Not to put more work on you, Sarah, like, totally, bop me on the head virtually if you feel like it, but it's really good stuff you're doing. And I think
It is
I'd love to
amazing.
hear what you're doing.
Yeah, Sarah, do you have thoughts on that?
I'm happy to attend a work group meeting and or have the folks that are on the team that have been doing the greatest work to sort of collect these materials and do the analysis. So I help to oversee and direct what people are doing, but there's a lot of people on the team that do different pieces of this. So we could certainly pull together the group that's been most involved in whatever the work group is interested in knowing about, whether it's the data analysis or the sort of pulling together and synthesizing the previous research so that their expertise can be utilized.
Absolutely. So I think that would be another thing to make sure that we include maybe in the agendas for the first reconvenings of the work groups, to get them, just to get us all back on the same page. Here's all the work that we're doing, that that people don't have the sense that they're coming together and starting from scratch in any way. We have a lot of ongoing work as a consortium that we want to make sure folks know about. Okay. I think that's the bulk of the agenda in terms of what we needed to plan for. I think we have some goals for next week in terms of hearing back from our work group chairs on how we're revving up these work groups, and that'll help us to figure out how to bring that together with directing the research and making sure that it's being considered. And so I think that's mostly what was on my agenda for today. Is there anything else anyone else wanted to get out there or make sure that we tackled in this particular meeting? No. Okay. Sounds good. I know we have one member of the public, and I think we're supposed to have a public comment time. So we, of course, would welcome that. Pam, if you had any questions or if you had a comment that you wish to make, now would be the time before we close out.
Thank you. No, I don't have anything at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
All right. Well, if no one has anything else, I think we can adjourn for today. Thanks for being here as always, and everything that you all do. And sounds like we will be back at it, not this Friday, but next Friday at 10:30. And I'm sure we'll talk.
Tizzy, did you mean?
Yes, Haley.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was going to be. Oh, so not this Friday. Okay,
Well,
I
it
see
can't
what you
be,
mean.
right?
Next Friday. Yeah, no, it can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, cool. But we can still talk to each other. Reach out if we have any questions as we get the work groups Going. Okay, well, if that's it, I'm good. Any final thoughts before we close it out? All right, thank you guys.
Thanks all.
Thank you.